Hey guys, Mathel here once again, and it's finally about time I got around to trying the latest Thorns project. This is just yet another attempt at Thorns, but this time around it's trying to make use of the new modifier on Ice Tomb that gives you 18% extra Thorns based off of your max mana. Now, there is also a support gem that gives you Thorns based off of mana while channeling, and that thing is dumb and hard to use. I've got it attached to my resonating shield, and it does kind of something, but essentially the main reason for mana scaling Thorns is the Ice Tomb chest. And let me tell you, it's barely worth using. So I built this character entirely around kind of the idea of doing mana Thorns, so getting a lot of mana, having some extra scaling off of that, and seeing if it can be anything. And if I can, as far as I can tell, it can't. It's okay. It'll do something, but the end result is you're essentially just making kind of a worse version of a regular Thorns character, because a regular Thorns character will have a regular chest piece that has a whole bunch of armor, a whole bunch of Thorns, and maybe some other cute little bells and whistles like, armor, Ellie conversion, whatever the fuck. And it'll just be straight up better. So I've kind of made a character here that has an okay amount of DPS for a Thorns build. I don't really feel lacking in my DPS whatsoever, but I'm much squishier than normal. And it is a bit disappointing, but I do think that there's probably still more Thorns support to come in the future in terms of weapon types or ascendancies or passives or unique gear, whatnot. Because it does seem to be a playstyle that they want to exist in this game. And currently, Thorns is pretty good. Like, it's a very just stable mid-tier build. I don't think it's really in need of any nerfs or adjustments from what some people have said, because it's not really over the top. It's probably some of the cleanest gameplay you'll have in PoE 2 as well, as almost nothing is happening on screen. You choose whatever skill you really want to clear with. In this case, I've chosen Rake once again because it's pretty good to do a bit of a gap closer, do a bit of an AoE, and then you can use rapid strikes for your payload of Thorns damage when you get hit and then use your Barb support. That's essentially how Thorns is. People either hit you and they take damage, or you hit them after you take some damage with the Barb's support. So it does make leveling quite nice and interesting, or rather overpowered than interesting, because you can get the very powerful 1 to 100 Thorns rune supports very early on, as soon as you want basically. They don't have a level requirement, and then just cheese the entire game. If you get the support for applying your Thorns damage as well, it gets pretty damn good. You can see that with a Gloom Shrine there, the clear is actually pretty nice, but of course we can't guarantee a Gloom Shrine. So when that happens, it feels quite a lot nicer. Aside from that, essentially Thorns gameplay is you're most excited to come across a boss and see what happens when they hit you and what you can do against them. Without that, it's pretty bland gameplay, and it is just more or less a novelty. So if you've never played Thorns before, it's going to be pretty damn interesting, and you're like, whoa, everything's killing itself. You can also chance a Headhunter randomly while playing Thorns. That'll happen. So yeah, that was the first Headhunter I chanced basically in the past few years, I think, and it happened in PoE 2 right at the kind of end of the interest of the league for everyone. And of course tried it out for the first time as well. I haven't actually tried a PoE 2 Headhunter before, so I just did one map with it. It's pretty crazy, as you'd expect. It hasn't really revolutionized Thorns gameplay too much. Might make you a little bit faster and whatnot, and make it a bit more interesting as well. But that is the point I was talking about. Thorns gameplay, not too interesting. So if you've never played it before, you will kind of enjoy it as a novelty that everything's killing itself and you're going slow and steady and winning just through sheer Thorns damage, which is kind of fun. But if you've played it before, it's hard to kind of want to play it again, I think. I was excited to try out the Mana Thorns and build a character around it. And once it was kind of built, I of course realized Mana Thorns wasn't that great, and then I was kind of just going through the motions playing it because it's not super fun at that point, and I was just trying to see where it could kind of take me, what I could end up doing damage wise, and what else was happening with the Thorns kind of archetype. So I think it is better right now than it was before, thanks to a few things, and mostly runes. and getting more sockets and stuff. So Thorns is stronger, I'd say, than it was before, and there's a few extra pieces of damage you can get, which I'll show in a sec. But it's not too revolutionized and hasn't changed too crazily. And I did a simulacrum 1 here where, like I said, I'm kind of squishy for a Thorns character. I can take normal hits and do normal maps, but once the going gets tough, it is tough. But if you're a real normal Thorns character, you should have a super just consistent, comfortable gameplay throughout most endgame content even. And I will also mention I went with Ritualist for this, which is... The idea was to get an extra ring slot so that I could scale mana a bit better and scale mana better on my current rings, and then also on the amulet a bit better too. At the end of the day, it was just kind of bad. Like, Ritualist does not offer much unless you're like scaling damage from your rings and stuff, and then maybe if you're a bleed build with blood boil and stuff. So in the end, that was kind of a mistake too, but I really wanted to force it, and force it I did. So a bit of a fail attempt, I'd say, at Thorns, because it's okay, but it's really not any better than a different Thorns build would have been. Either way, let me go ahead and show you how the character's built and talk a bit about Thorns. So there's a character at the moment, level 84 Ritualist. My Ascend is a ring slot, and that is no lie. Basically, I was doing this for the plus ring slot and then also the buffs from my rings and amulets. And that's kind of what that looks like. You get an additional ring slot. And the idea was that, yeah, just get some extra mana there, bit of extra, res and stuff. And then also boost my other rings for mana as well. Because if you have a look around, it's pretty tough to see too much mana scaling when it comes to ascendancies and the passive tree in general. So it is tough to scale mana as far as I can tell. It ends up being a pretty weird passive tree, but I don't know. I don't know if you can do much better regardless. If you started as a Titan, the usual buffing small passives, pretty generically good and would probably still be better than what I currently have. Either way, I tried to build it around gain cold Thorns damage equal to 18% of your max mana, which in the end isn't a huge amount. Like, I think if you go all out, you can get, much bigger mana values, but it would be a more lopsided build, and instead I had to start balancing it a bit better by getting Thorns elsewhere and taking a more balanced approach for Thorns scaling. So, as I mentioned, these 3 to 100 lightning runes are pretty OP early on. You can kind of like base your entire build around them even, but yeah, if you just put some of these on like, 1, 2, 3 socket items as you're leveling up, you can kind of like cheese the campaign. So if you've got a bit of extra money, you can definitely do that. And then, of course, the Crown of the Pale King is what's going to let you do Thorns damage to all type of damage. Once you get that thing on at level 16, it gets crazy. And then once you get the Briar Patch Boots as well, combine that stuff and you've almost got crit cap by itself. It's pretty good scaling early on and for a normal Thorns build. The other good stuff you can do these days is Sakawal's Rune of the Sky. 5% of damage is extra damage of all elements. And if you craft a weapon in the way that I've done so here, it can be pretty damn good for the extra damage as well. Gain 20% of damage as extra fire, and then 15 of every element, which is a pretty large amount of damage in the end, and you can do these very reliably. All you gotta do is buy a 2-socket, whatever weapon you want. So in this case, Spear. Then just use, fill it up with something for magic, put on a essence of alacrity, haste, whatever it is, speed, so that you get the extra speed, fill it up the rest of the way, and then use an essence for removing a prefix and adding a Ellie roll. You then corrupt until you get 3-socket. Rinse and repeat until you got a 3-socket one. Make sure you're using these things to make sure you're getting an outcome, and then you can reliably have a pretty good stat stick for a Thorns build. Otherwise, I'm also running Chernobog's Pillar this time around, which gives a lot of extra fire damage per chance to block, so we get 50% block, 50% fire damage. And then the rest of the stuff is pretty basic, I think. Scale your, attack speed, your crit damage, Thorns belt, and yeah, that's kind of how it's looking there. So the damage, as you can see here, is pretty spread out, and I am more or less Tri-Ele when doing this thing. Got a little bit of Fizz Thorns, but a lot of Fire Thorns here. Cold, which is where most of this is coming from, and then a bunch of lightning as well. I'm crit capped, and I've got decent amount of crit damage bonus, so it is a different attempt of a Thorns build than a pure Fizz, but you can also just take a lot of these like extra scalings off of a pure Fizz Thorns build instead, and still have pretty good success. So Because I'm a bit more Ellie based, I can spec some other cooler shit, like the Ellie nodes over here. So we've got damage against ignited, against shield, against shocked. I'm doing all three of those reliably. All the Ellie nodes there, Ellie and exposure nodes over here, and I've also got an extra damage for Ellie elements on enemy there, and using a Heart of the Well, which gives extra fire damage, some Thorns crit, and some crit too. Yeah, so that's basically, it's still pretty much a normal Thorns build. You definitely want to still be getting Thorns damage leeches life. That is hugely OP for your survivability, and you can combine it with the instant leech. I managed to get a Megalomaniac, I think it is. Where we got? Not that, not that. This one here. Megalomaniac that has Harness the Elements and Vengeance. So that is the instant leech over here, and also this one over here. That thing combined, it was like 2 divines and just pretty much perfect for my build. And then I anointed Cooked, which is down here for all the extra crit damage bonus. So a more normal Thorns build wouldn't have to, waste some shit over here doing Ritualist, and you'd also just be a bit more armor based and kind of immune to damage, most likely, but I'm not sure you hit quite as much damage. Maybe you do, because typically you'd also be scaling Scavenge Plating. In my case, I only started doing some Scavenge Plating by the end of the build, just for a bit of extra stuff, and it does work out well enough, but yeah, it's not as good or reliable on a pure Fizz Thorns build. I'm using Resonating Shield to kind of do the Crackling Barrier thing. As I said, this thing's pretty bad and hard to make use of, especially with Resonating Shield, because you get knocked down plenty. And yeah, if I was more of a armor-based Thorns build, maybe it'd be a lot more reliable to use it, but still, it's kind of bad. And then it's what I'm using for my armor break at the moment. So just, sometimes go in there and armor break some enemies, and boom, that's what's happening. So yeah, a normal Thorns build I think is going to be still quite a bit better, but you can maybe take some of the scaling tips here for what I tried to do with the Ellie Thorns thing. I tried Blood Boil, didn't do anything for my build. Spear Stab over here is to remove armor break so I can reapply it if I need to, and also remove freeze on enemies because, yeah, them freezing means they're doing nothing, so it's actually really bad for us. Rake over here has Barbs 2 and Quill Burst, so shit's OP combined. Ancestral Call is making it quite a bit nicer for clear as well. We then have Area and Rapid Attacks. Scavenge Plating has Thorn Skin, and one piece of cheese tech you can do is actually just scale these apparently a lot. I don't think that's really intentional. Surely it's an oversight, but you can have a lot of these if you have them on multiple buffs and just increase Thorn's damage. So I think some people are scaling off of like Tacticians, less reserved for stuff, and you can just have a lot of these as your basically main source of Thorn's damage. But I've got one over here with Fizz Mastery, Skill Duration, and Life on Kill. Resonating Shield's doing some crap. Rapid Assault has Barbs and Quill Burst, as well as Rage for speed, Rigord's Ferocity, and Rapid Attacks. I'm using Magma Barrier for its extra block chance buff, but otherwise it's not really doing much. I tried to make it do some damage. I don't think it's doing too much. It's got Thorn Skin there as well. Elemental Element, Close Combat, Conk Area, and then I'm using Frostbomb for the Ellie exposure, and that has Overabundance, Cast Speed, and Echo, so it does cast 2 of them, and that does stack up the exposure pretty much instantly to maximum. Other than that, yeah, not too much else to mention. It's a Ritualist, which I don't love as an ascendancy right now. Thorns is still a cool concept, and has some pretty big novelty moments, especially throughout the campaign. But once you're in like mapping and endgame, it does feel a bit basic and a bit bland to be playing. Either way, you can still take it pretty damn far, and if you play it as a more normal ascendancy, I think you can have quite a lot of fun with it. The rest of the stuff I took here was just like charm slots. Like in theory, I could get rid of this and have more reliable charms, but I don't love interacting with charms right now or what they're doing. So I just took the life recovery, and yeah, you can otherwise have some crap, I guess. Anyway, and then yeah, no real MTX on this character, I think. Just an Arctic hat to go with my, chest that we're doing. And then Paladin weapon effect makes our Chernobyls look kind of cool. So, yep, that's what's happening. Thorns, mana scaling. Don't think it's particularly worth it right now. Maybe I'm wrong, which is fine. But otherwise, basic Thorns, still pretty good. So if you want to check that out, you definitely can. With that, thank you very much for watching. See you guys next time.